Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Eric Paulin and Eric Shedlarski. They're the co-founders of Cultivation Warehouse. Thank you very much for joining me today, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Eric, I'd like to start with you first, Eric Paulin. And for the sake of the listeners, we're going to call Eric Paulin, you go by Eric, and Eric Shedlarski, you normally go by Shed, right?
Correct.
That's correct.
That's good.
Too many
Keeps it
Erics.
easy. Keeps it easy on me, too. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com. All right, Eric, I always like to start with how you got involved in the cannabis industry. I mean, you guys have been around for more than a decade, right?
Yeah. I've been doing this for nearly 20 years. I think Shed closer to 25 or more than that, possibly.
Oh, wow.
I got into the industry. I was, growing back in the unregulated days. I was a fresh-faced 15-year-old and went into a local hydro store and dropped off a resume. And, they ended up hiring me and, kind of went through all the different ranks of that store, from working the front, working the warehouse, doing RMAs. I used to build fan speed controllers and ballasts and timers. And, then eventually managed that store, managed their distribution. Shed had his own chain of retail hydro stores, Santa Cruz Hydroponics. He ended up acquiring the store and distribution center that I worked for. So I kind of came along with the acquisition. That was about 20 years ago, maybe a little shy of that. But Shed and I have been working together ever since. It's been a great partnership.
Shed, how did you get started owning the store?
Well, I originally had started my first company back in college. I was starting an irrigation company, and I was always, growing weed pretty much when I left high school into college. And so was always interested in hydroponics and worked at greenhouses and landscapers and tropical plant stores. And so I was always around plants. And when I moved to California, there was an opportunity at we had the only hydroponic store. It had opened like a week before I moved here. I went in and put in a resume, and about 2 weeks later, he was thinking about selling part of it and wanted to sell it to me because we had a great relationship. So I bought part of the store and kind of just went from there. It was a little 700 to 800 square foot store and turned into stores all over the U.S.
Do you still operate the stores?
No. Nope.
Go ahead.
No, I sold them about 4 or 5 years ago now, off the retail side of it, and kind of started the commercial, which is what this developed into.
Okay. When you launched, was it Cultivation Warehouse out of the gate, or has it evolved into that?
Well, Cultivation Warehouse is new by name, I guess. Only most of our staff have been with us for many years, almost as long as Eric. But there's been, many different names of companies. For a long time, it was, we always had different names in different regions just because we thought it had a more homely feel to it. And we didn't want to be corporate America and the, kind of alternative lifestyle business that we're in, cannabis culture. So there's been many names. So Cultivation Warehouse is new as a name and company, but not in concept or in people.
So what was behind the transition from to the commercial side of the business?
Sure.
Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So, we had been doing retail, I don't remember exactly when it started, probably 2003, 2001, somewhere around there. But so we had our retail establishments, and then 2011, 2012, I believe right around when Colorado came online, Shed saw this opportunity that a lot of these licensed producers, these commercial grows, were still kind of using, hobby level technologies and processes. They weren't utilizing rolling benches, which today seems like a really common thing to see in all facilities. But rolling benches are only something you really see in floriculture facilities. Large scale commercial HVAC systems, horticultural control systems, drip irrigation, all this was kind of unheard of in commercial cannabis at that time, which is kind of surprising now because this is just, standard operating procedure for all these facilities. But Shed saw this vacuum in the industry and decided to start what I believe is the first cannabis CEA department. And that was back in the days of Gardening Unlimited, which was the parent company over all our retail stores. So, we maintained the CA department and we kind of chased all the markets as they open, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, California, and so forth. And it's continued to grow. And at this point, I believe we've done projects in every US state with medical or recreational cannabis laws. We've done probably about 300 or so projects at this point. We have somewhere between 50 and 60 active projects at the moment. Anywhere from a few thousand square feet of canopy craft grows to we're even working on greenhouses with over 1 million square feet of total footprint. So tons of different range and scale. There's never one size fit all. We work with about half of the top 10 MSOs as well, So kind of dabble in a little bit of everything.
Is it primarily hydroponics?
It is primarily hydroponics. I mean, there's still an application for soil. And I guess really the only primary differentiation between those two things is one is an inert substrate that you have to add your own fertilizers. The other would typically be a soil that's pre-amended with a lot of those, constituents, compost and earthworm castings, that thing, are using liquid organic fertilizers. It's, there's still a huge benefit to growing organically, and I'd like to see organic growing. It presents its own certain set of challenges on a large scale commercial application. Irrigation kind of has to be refined to support that. If you want to do living soil, using a repeat bed, over and over, there's inherent risks with doing that with, introducing pathogens, and how do you get rid of those in the long term? So more out of necessity, we see more hydro grows than soil, but I mean, it is a mixture of both.
Shed, when you started in the retail side and then started transitioning into the commercial side of the business, did you foresee the sort of slow rollout of legalization state by state that we've seen? Did you expect it to be faster? Did you think we'd be federal by now? Or did you think that where did you see the industry going?
Well, I think right as pace as it is right now. There's a lot of still fear out there in a lot of states and with people and what cannabis is and how it can help be, benefit, to people medically and economically to a state. And so it's about right where I thought it would be. I'd hoped that banking would have been resolved by now, but it's not. So That's probably the biggest hurdle in reality to all of this.
Eric, when your customers come to you, what stage are they at? Are they at initial planning? Will you take over when somebody else has kind of dropped the ball? When are you guys approached?
So we get approached at various different stages throughout the process, but I'd say the ideal stage to approach us is after a license has been acquired, when a facility is typically being vetted, and before you really get into architectural and engineering. But we get in at all phases. Sometimes we get brought in late phases to fix problems or value engineer, so whatever solution's already been engineered. But yeah, the earlier the better. It's a really common approach to a lot of these commercial facilities, which is sometimes can be their downfall. But everyone says they take a holistic approach, which everyone should. You have to consider all the parts and pieces of what's eventually going to go into this facility. You have to maximize your license. You have to consider workflow optimization. You have to consider the budget, the construction timeline. All these different facets. But even though they're considering all these things, there's a process that kind of has to be followed, and there's a lot of collaboration that has to be done with all the teams. And it's really common. It's not always the what happens, but it's really common to see an architect turn loose and say, "This is what I think the facility should look like." But they haven't really had a discussion yet with what kind of HVAC solutions we're planning on implementing. Do we need to put a mechanical room in there? Where are we going to place HVAC equipment around the perimeter of the building? So it's really common to see, one of the different disciplines or trades kind of turned loose, said, here's where we came up with, and then kind of working backwards from there, and then, re-engineering things, redrawing things until you get to the final place, which unfortunately is at the detriment of our clients' timelines and budgets, because, they already are paying rent or paying and usually have half their staff hired. So, the longer these things take to get designed, the more burn rate that there is. So our goal is to try to streamline all those different processes, get everyone working together. We actually just recently started offering our own architectural and engineering services, but we had always worked with our clients' architects and MEP teams. So the goal is to really, make sure that we can get our clients to market faster and save them as much money as possible throughout the whole design process.
I mean, it's interesting because you guys go all the way through the initial planning, through equipment installation. How long how long is somebody looking at that process from beginning to finish?
Commonly, it's these cycles can be long. I would say it almost never happens faster than 6 months, and it's more common to be like around the 12 to 18 month range. I mean, there's so many variables at play too. It's like a lot of times we'll see people, designing and getting ready to build out a facility in a certain market that's maybe pretty established, and maybe there's a temporary market compression that, kind of gives them cold feet, might make them step back and reconsider if, how quickly they want to deploy or at what scale they want to deploy. But I'd say, if you had to take a rolling average, it's about a year, give or take. Okay. It's pretty darn often to hear someone say, we're going to be doing this, growing plants in 2 months. Well, even if we ordered equipment today, you're not going to have your equipment for 4 to 6 months, most likely.
I mean, to have a facility and staff hired before there's equipment in the door, is that just, sort of rookie mistakes from new business owners?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's certain, ideally we want to be engaging with the director of cultivation through the whole design and equipment specification process. And, we can design things to sort of best manufacturing practices. And we've done enough of these facilities to generally know, we're the right way to approach each one. But if we don't have the DOC involved in that process and signing off on these decisions, what commonly happens is they'll hire their cultivator later, bring them in and they say, oh, I'd actually rather do things this way or this way or this way. And then it kind of delays the process and you have to kind of reconvene to see if that their ideas have merit or not. So ideally we are interfacing with their cultivators. Usually they bring on a project manager too. Sometimes that's in-house, sometimes that's third party, but.
Shed, how often are you guys, sort of looking at what a client has in front of you and just starting to make tweaks here and there and saying, okay, I understand your choice to go this way, but really this would be your best option?
Well, it's very common. It's probably 80% of the time. Mm-hmm. And we find that, we're most effective when we have clients that, trust us. And so we back up that information with data and give people information. Generally speaking, we're product agnostic. And we're all about making sure that customers are successful. We're not trying to push this brand of light or that brand of light or this fertigator or that fertigator just because we have a better opportunity to make money. That's, we look at it as a long-term relationship, which most of our customers, some of them are, from day one beginning, and we've got people who've been with us for 20 years. And our job is really to get them to be, generating, positive revenue and best possible product for the cheapest possible price.
What are some of those common pitfalls or mistakes where you see that you could make an immediate switch and help the bottom line?
I would say that people are really apt to feeling like they want to use this brand manufacturer of benching, let's say, and that benching might not be the best product for this design space. Let's say the building already exists. We don't have the chance to move walls. We're kind of, we're pigeonholed into, certain factors, and it could be benching, irrigation, could be for, water room, different things. And so it's really our job to say, look, that this manufacturer makes this one makes this one. We're going to get you 15% more canopy in your room, and you're going to spend less money, and we'll get it to you faster. Right. And it might be less money for us in the long run, but that's how we gain trust with people. And we say, this is how much more money you're going to make. And this is very simple. So that's an example of a pitfall.
Right on. Eric, after 20 plus years in the industry, I have to imagine that you guys have some incredible war stories out there. What were some of the more difficult or challenging installations that you faced?
Oh man, where to even start? I'd say that, the installation, there's always going to be, hiccups and challenges through that process of, making sure that our client has a good construction team, that's a good construction team, good construction manager, good project manager, that's going to nip most of those problems from the get-go. From the engineering side, we actually see, and it's, not disparaging any engineers. We work with a lot of fantastic engineers out there, but what's really interesting is one of the biggest capital expenditures our clients are going to make is their HVAC equipment, your mechanical equipment. And it's really common just to sort of turn that loose to the engineers without any criteria of exactly how they should be specifying it. And it's interesting because it's, your engineers can figure out your sensible loads, and, possibly they might be able to figure out your latent loads. They can figure out your spatial and structural constraints. They can figure out utility and electrical constraints. They can determine maybe what's the best equipment based on your geographic location. But, they'll still need input from the cultivation team on ideal environmental set points and acceptable dead bands. One of the biggest vacuums is, what's the budget? What are we even designing this thing around? What's an acceptable ROI if we're considering, spending a little bit more money on something that has a better operational expense? And, I feel like maybe a lot of time the principals or the executives of these businesses don't want to disclose what the budget is or what's an acceptable ROI, because they're always, trying to get someone to design as economically as possible. And if you start setting targets, they're just going to, cap out those targets. But it ends up being a detriment, because what ends up happening is engineering happens and the budget, maybe it's way beyond what they thought it could be, or maybe the building wasn't designed in a way that's conducive to the system they want to put there. So they have to go to a more expensive system to fit within the confines of the building. And you end up with a solution that maybe works, but isn't the most ideal solution or isn't the most economical solution. So then they'll go back and they'll value engineer. And it just sort of turns into this long drawn out process where now we're getting to market 6, 9, 12 months later than we should have if we just had these frank conversations from the beginning. So honestly, it's just, lack of communication. We really need to sit down and have pre-engineering meetings about how we're planning on, approaching the project.
Shed, how about, oh, sorry, go ahead, Shed. What comes to mind when you hear me ask about war stories?
I think we're really lucky that we just don't have a ton. Eric and I have worked together for so long, and while we've been doing this for a really long time, we watched a lot of other failures along the way, and we've taken a stepped marked approach where we're saying, we've worked with engineers and architects as we just said, hey, we finally, we brought some people on to bring this in-house because we think we can do it faster and better and cheaper. Maybe not better, but faster and cheaper, which gets people to market faster. First to market in new markets, usually people win if they have good facilities and good people. So finding out, asking lots of questions at the beginning, making sure that the people that we're working with are a good fit for us are just as important. It's just not take any client and say this is our client, and making sure that the planning at the beginning of these things is very good, so that we don't end up with these oh gosh moments at the end when people try to go live. So it's good partnerships with good vendors, people who are looking at these businesses for the success of the business, not just trying to sell a product. While we're equipment reps, the consulting is a side business for us, where we don't generate really any money off the consulting. But for us, it's a means to an end to make sure that we can spend the time to get the job done properly and specify the correct equipment and maximize these facilities for people. So, we just don't really have any, we just don't. And Eric and I kind of chuckle about this every once in a while. I'm like, okay, we don't have any failures yet. And we've been doing this for a long time. And the amount of people who listen, and we're really here. We care about our clients. We truly, we're either the worst salespeople or the best. I'm not sure. We're always talking people out of buying stuff. We're like, hey, we can do this for cheaper, which we think there's some kind of a, mental block there for a lot of people, because we're the equipment salespeople and we're telling them to buy less. I think that sometimes people stumble on that, and oftentimes we're kind of, negotiating with engineers and being like, we could do it that way, but we could spend $5 million less and we're going to get there this way. And so I think sometimes that's our biggest hurdle as a business, I would say, is that, we're just some cannabis guys, right? We're not engineers. We didn't go to school for engineering. So I think that's probably our biggest hurdle in getting people to, making sure that they trust us because we're actually in it for their success.
I like that you said we don't have any failures yet, at least for the people that listen.
Yeah. Yeah. We it's not uncommon for us to come into jobs and look and say, of course, these guys have got generally they're borrowing money from someone, right? they look at it and they say, well, okay, well, I've got $25 million or $50 million to build this facility plus my operational costs. So, and then you've got these cultivators. And by the way, the market has become much smarter. People have gotten better and better and better. So we're able to have good, educated conversations with people about what we're doing most of the time now. Mm-hmm. But it's really that, we need to, show people that if they don't have to spend all the money on the first grow, they can build phase 2 or phase 3 or another grow in another state. And that's, again, I'm going to kind of keep circling back to, that's how we make our money, right? Mm-hmm. It's by giving people the right product and not spending all their money right up front, getting into the next job. And really those are the vast majority of our business is repeat business. And old clients referring them, and also our vendors referring clients to us. But those partnerships, and we really do look at those as partnerships. No one's a client or whatever. To us, these are our partners. We work for them, and the vendors the same way. Are good vendors, and there are many of them out there that are here to give people good information and act like we act.
Well, I mean, that's a certain indicator of that you're doing good business with somebody, is that most of it comes via referral, whether it's from your manufacturing partners or people that you've worked with in the past. Eric, you talk about having some of these clients, since you were on the retail side, like 20 plus years. What's it been like to watch some of these partners grow over the years?
It's awesome. I get to consider some of the best growers and some of the biggest brands in the world my friends, and a lot of them have been friends for 20 plus years. Coming from the unregulated market, I tend to try not to name names, even though, I think it's probably best if I, talk about all the great people that we're working with. But, one of our favorite and, longest clients just recently won a cup, and, that's many clients that have won cups. So that's honestly one of the most rewarding parts of the whole thing, is getting to grow with our friends and clients and see their successes.
I think if you look at the Emerald Cup, there's a very large segment of those winners are our customers. And we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah, that speaks for itself. You had mentioned choosing the most appropriate equipment for cultivation. How do you establish partnerships with manufacturers? How do you vet equipment manufacturers before you kind of bring them into your portfolio?
That's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead,
please. Sure. Just through naturally, working in the space for 20 to 25 years, we kind of know everybody already that's worth knowing or has a solution worth considering. And, there's so many criteria of, what makes the solution the right one. I kind of touched on that earlier. Cost, of course, is the main consideration, and lead time is probably the secondary consideration. But, there's upfront costs, there's operating costs. How likely is it, if you have an issue with the equipment, that the manufacturer is going to pick up the phone and offer support? Do they have a good warranty? Are they consistent? Are they accurate? It depends on which type of equipment you're talking about too. I mean, HVAC, not to keep touching on that, but, even though there's a lot of different solutions from a lot of different brands that at face value seem pretty similar, 140-ton unit might be pretty darn similar to another 40-ton unit. But I mean, they all have different lead times. They all maybe operate at different efficiencies at different low ambient set points or geographic locations. They all have maybe different options you can add on: 1 circuit of hot gas reheat, 2 circuits of hot gas reheat, and maybe pricing slightly changes between those 2 options. But, we're able to sit down and then run pretty accurate cost benefit analysis that says, okay, well, you can get this system for it's $500,000 cheaper, but, this other system's going to save, 10 or 15 grand a month on your operating costs. So are you okay with a 3-year ROI? So those are a lot of the conversations we have. Typically when we look at all these different categories of equipment that we supply, lighting, benching, HVAC, controls, irrigation, fertigation, and dozens of others, we'll usually look at least 3 or more different options per category. And we'll really sit down and we'll have meetings with our clients and kind of review all of those different criteria. Does this meet your timeline? Does this meet your budget? Is this something that you think is this a technology that's going to be relevant in 3, 4, 5 years? If you want to sell the business in 3 to 4, 5 years, is the person buying the business going to want to buy it if it has this kind of technology in it? So there's many considerations towards every piece of equipment. And we're glad to review all the differences. It's part of what we do.
Well, you talk about technology that remains relevant. A lot of people that I've talked to previously, they talk about working with manufacturers that, they go under, particularly in lighting. I've heard about it more often than other equipment. But so do you make sure that the manufacturer has sort of been established in the marketplace for a while, rather than kind of taking a chance on a new player?
I mean, I think that I can speak to that. I mean, it's really important that, you said, how do you really, choose a manufacturer, choose your vendor partners? And it's, lighting was a huge problem. We'll say LED lighting was a huge problem in our business for a long time. And even before that, electronic ballast, right? And what it really comes down to is that I think everybody's going to have a problem here and there in production at some point, right? But it's who is your good partner, who stands up, says, I'm fixing it right away. Here we go. Here's the solution. And they're quick and they're agile. And they also, referring to who's a good vendor partner. There are people who want us to be successful too, right? So we choose people who don't compete against us in the market, that act as our partner. We work with a lot of different manufacturers, and it's important that, we spread the jobs around to them and make sure everybody has a chance to succeed. But every manufacturer might have a little niche that they're better at, just like he was saying with HVAC, like lighting. There's some lighting manufacturers that, make sense for certain parts of the cultivation, and some that work for others. And it could be price point, could be, many different things, but performance, ultimately, it always comes back to the same thing: cheapest, possible production, best possible production for the cheapest price. Sorry. But it's good partnerships.
Shed, when you're troubleshooting at one facility, how often does it happen that if it's an issue here, it'll be an issue at maybe a handful of other facilities, and then you kind of go in and try to preemptively get ahead of the same issue?
And knock on wood, I mean, it's rare we have that problem. A lot of these facilities are very unique too, and what their equipment selections may be pretty unique as well. I mean, I think it's important to note that we're more like systems integrators. These control systems have to work with their HVAC system, which have to work with their CO2 system, which have to work with their lighting, and so it's rare that, again, we're not the cutting, bleeding edge guys. We are here to make sure you generate money. And you asked a question earlier. It's like, how do you select? Who do you select? And it's kind of like, well, look, there's this new technology out. Do you guys want to be the ones to spend your $5 million and see if you think this is the best time to, experiment, or you want to do that in phase 2, maybe, so right. We're apt to not push new technology, but we're also educated enough in our own experience with working with manufacturers of knowing who's really done their trial runs, who we can be confident in that they have a good product, and that who will back it up even if they didn't, and if the customer wanted to take that lead.
And just to add to that, there's a lot of technologies that may not be new, but are new to this industry that we've been keeping our finger on the pulse on for years. A lot of stuff in Holland's coming out all the time, or has been established in the Holland hort market. And so we're trying to get a lot of those technologies rolled out. We see a lot of merit and value in them, to decrease, your operating costs, your labor costs. So, expect some pretty cool stuff to come out from us this year.
You talk about, Eric, you mentioned how, you've worked in every legal state. As you're going from job to job, state to state, there are different regulations, different rules. Do you have sort of a templated approach as to how you get started with the project, or, does the unique nature of each one kind of make you start from scratch each time?
A little bit of both. We definitely have processes that we follow for every project, but, you absolutely have to consider the legal framework of the market that you're working in. Excuse me. First things first, what are we working with? Is this, a canopy-based state? 95% or more markets are canopy-based instead of plant-based, which, makes a lot of sense. But you have to consider, how are we approaching this? How much canopy are we trying to put in here? Water actually is interesting because this is something that changes a lot from state to state to state, or even, within different water districts within each state, are the requirements of, how you're treating your runoff. And so, doing kind of an early deep dive, we do feasibility reviews on every project where we kind of go through all the check boxes of things we may need to consider, things that our clients maybe haven't even thought of yet, to make sure that we can get ahead of them as early as possible, instead of, getting halfway through the design and saying, oh crap, we have to now integrate this other water filter or evaporator, this type of technology, it costs $100,000. You weren't, considering spending, and you don't have the space to put it in there. It's really important we go through all those checks, as early as possible.
Eric, you'd mentioned some equipment in particular that can help with labor problems. There's a labor shortage going around that's impacting not just cannabis, but pretty much every industry. What are some of the things that you've seen that can help a cannabis cultivator when it comes to maybe requiring less of a head count?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, automation is key. I think most people are caught on to this, at the earlier stages of the legal markets, people are still hand watering, which is kind of insane to think of these days, the amount of labor that's required to do that, and the inconsistency. When we look at a project, it's not just increase canopy, increase your, maximize your license, decrease your labor costs. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But one of the, drip irrigation is going to be probably the biggest thing to reduce your labor costs compared to hand watering or something like that. And consistency, because, it's almost like we're designing a manufacturing facility. We are designing a manufacturing facility. When you design a manufacturing facility, consistency is key. You want to make sure your yields are consistent. You want to make sure your quality is consistent. And if you have people out there hand watering plants, you're going to have plants uptaking water, transpiring different rates. Things aren't really, if you can dial things in through a process called crop steering, which is, was kind of new a few years ago, but now most people have caught on to, where you're really closely monitoring both the moisture content and the fertilizer content in your substrate, and changing your irrigation practices based on what's the ideal EC value or moisture content in your substrate. That's been one of the biggest gains to both quality and yields we've seen on the irrigation side of things. But other things to decrease labor costs. There's other types of automated systems. People kind of started off with moving with rolling benches, and now we have rolling racks. So we're taking advantage of much vertical space as possible. But something I was kind of hinting at earlier is, the Dutch use these mobile container systems pretty frequently. And it's really a completely automated system to get your benching from, a multi-hectare greenhouse, and, move it over to the head house where all of your staff are operating in one area. Whereas you might normally have 20, 30, 50, 100 staff members in this giant multi-acre greenhouse, you can get your labor down to 6 to 12 people working in a head house and just have all the plants come to you. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to decrease labor, but, it's all an evaluation. Again, we get into ROI calcs and cost benefit analysis, and we say, okay, well, if you're willing to spend a little bit more, we think we can reduce your labor cost by this much, and the paybacks in X amount of months or years. So
I think there's, to add to that too, is that there's a level of comfortability that people don't have, right? And so even so, transitioning from, HPS bulbs to double-ended HPS bulbs, then to LED, then to, whatever the next technology is going to be. But, potting machines and conveyors and mobile containers and, pot washers and all this automated equipment, joint rollers. I mean, everything from A to B and mechanized trimming, all those things take somebody taking that risk and seeing it work, and then other people are like, well, can I go see it? I want to see it in action. And a lot of times we can't take everybody to everybody's place all the time, so it's kind of got to happen through education from our part, and talking about what Eric said was ROI, and following through with how is this better, how do I generate more money. But there's also the cannabis culture too, and so you talk about good product in the end, who always is able to sell their product in any market, no matter how the market's fluctuating. High quality product is, we're always pushing, is this going to be a detriment to the quality of the product? And if we're suggesting it, then it's a no from us, that we're ultimately very comfortable with it. But it's really that people have to be comfortable with, these processes. And when we talk about directors of cultivation, most of the time these days, they're not just growers, they're great managers, and they're great at looking at, their operations people. They, and so the people that, we've seen that have been really successful are able to do, be great managers, but also be forward thinking and looking at how can I make more money and how can I preserve the quality of my product. And so that's, something that we really focus on with people, but we can't change people too quickly. They're just not willing to do it. There's some people who are like, hey, I want to build spaceships all the time. We're like, you don't really need the spaceship. This is going to work great for you. We're going to save you a bunch of money, and let's do an R&D room maybe with you, or we'll do one room or something like that, because ultimately there's a money guy usually. And then there's the growers and everybody else. And it's very important for us to balance the expectations of both of those groups.
Eric, what does the competitive landscape look like for CW versus some of the other firms out there that potentially offer the similar services to what you guys have?
I'm not sure that I completely understand the question. What are our competitors like, or how do they operate?
No. I mean, how many competitors are there out there, that offer similar services?
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, of course we have competitors in the space. We have one of the oldest CEA departments in the country. So I think we have the benefit of seeing and dealing with more facilities than our competitors have. It's really common to see people, and I can't knock it because we're kind of similar. We came from the retail space and we've kind of evolved into this CEA commercial offering, but we still see a lot of our competitors are very retail centric, still focusing on the kind of the hobby level growers. And they, a lot of their knowledge base, and again, not knocking their staff, because some of these guys are great. We have some great people working in this space, but a lot of their staff, still have that small scale mentality and don't really understand, these large scale commercial systems. They don't understand the controls. They don't understand all the HVAC options out there. Probably the competitors that are closest to aptitude would be greenhouse CA departments, but even them, they have their lane of greenhouses. And, while there are a lot of similarities between greenhouse and indoor cultivation, there's, often completely different types of technologies and approaches that go into each one of those things. So, I think we have the benefit of probably doing more indoor grows than any other facility, competitor or department or CEA company out there at this point. So,
okay. Shed, you guys had talked earlier about some of the new services that you guys were offering. And it seems like it's all in an effort to, help provide more of a consultative approach with your partners and shorten development timelines. So how, ever since you started offering those new services, how have things been taken off?
Surprisingly fast. We, I'd say our close rate's pretty good. Again, more faster than I thought it would be. People are really looking for, an all-in-one solution, and, having the ability to say, hey, we've already worked with these guys a bunch of times. And we know that they're going to charge you less because we're already doing a bunch of their work for them. That's part of our job. And, working as a team, together, and instead of, like Eric was saying, I'm trying to think of the word you use, but, it's really everybody, working from the beginning to get a good design done in the first pass, maybe the second, and not this, disjointed from one department to the next department, the next department, the next department. So, it's gone really well. We're pretty excited about it.
I find it interesting, you had mentioned that you're more systems integrators, and covering not just the cannabis industry, but other industries in the manufacturing industry. That's just more and more companies are looking for that because they don't have that expertise in-house. So I just think that the fact that you guys are offering all of those services, I mean, that's just got to put you ahead in the market.
I mean, we think so. And like we've been successful at doing it. So we're always taking that, like I said, that stepped approach to make sure we have the right partners, whether that's vendors, architects, engineers, that we have enough capacity to do the job in the timelines that people want them done. And so we really focus on making sure that, that's what we do. And we don't need to rush. There's plenty of these jobs in the world, and we look forward to, spreading our wings a little further. But there's no reason to rush. There's plenty of opportunity. There's a lot more states to come online, much less the rest of the world. Not only that, in reality, there's, the whole vegetable market, and we'll say other indoor CEA markets that we've, had the opportunity to delve into more recently, because people see the opportunity in those markets. Now that there's success here, there's no reason there can't be success in these other markets, food security, et cetera. I mean, there's just more opportunity by the day.
Eric, as more states have come online, like New York and other things on the East Coast, what have you found exciting? Do you try and get into those states as they come online, or do you sort of wait for potential partners to come to you via word of mouth?
I think it's important to try to get into the emerging markets as early as possible. New Jersey is one that's definitely going off really quickly for us, and for the state, of course, that's rapidly rolling out. New York is a little bit more trepidatious; they're still figuring it out. But yeah, absolutely, we try to get in markets as early as possible. We're very active in the Southeast. A lot of those states have started coming online too. We were very active. We still are. The Midwest, Illinois, Michigan. It kind of ebbs and flows. Once states have been around and matured for a long time, they begin to get a little compressed and saturated. So then you start seeing more facilities and opportunities pop up in different parts of the country. But yeah, so I'd say that, yeah, we're probably the busiest in all the emerging markets. Northeast and Southeast are probably the two biggest ones at the moment.
Before we get out of here, I always like to ask for predictions. And I know that, if everyone could predict the future, whatever, it'd be a slam dunk. But what are your expectations? Eric, I'll start with you. What are your expectations for the industry going forward? Maybe potential states that we'll see come online next, and the prospect of federal legalization.
Well, as Shed alluded to earlier, I think we need to get banking dealt with first. I'd love to see a sweeping reform. In some senses that would be good, in some senses it wouldn't. But banking is the first thing. We need to get safe banking for our clients, and making sure that a lot of robberies in a lot of different parts of the countries, and people shouldn't have to handle cash. It doesn't make sense. What other states are going to come online next? I don't know. I mean, federal legalization is getting some momentum. I don't know if it's going to get pushed through as quickly as, everyone's hoping it to, but I think we're going to see kind of some sweeping reforms to how facilities are built and structured throughout the country. I mean, once federal legalization comes online and we can do interstate commerce, you're going to see a lot larger facilities pop up in areas that are more conducive to doing greenhouses. You'll see, California is probably going to, there's a lot of different states across the country that have conducive climates to greenhouse cultivation, but you'll see sort of more of an investment in larger facilities and not this smattering of different facilities throughout the country. And then later, once exports happen, then it's a whole new game,
Shed, how about your predictions for the future?
I think we've got, at least 5 years is my guess before federal legalization, happens. I think there's too much stuff dealing with the economy and everything else that's going on in the world right now. And that's just outshadowed what, we had a lot of good momentum. Maybe some stuff gets pushed through on the back end that nobody sees. And it's kind of just tag alongs on some bills. But, I think it's, we'll see, we've obviously got, Alabama, we've got Utah, we've got some of these, states that you never thought were going to happen and go medical anytime soon. So I think, Virginia is probably next, the Carolinas. I think we'll see more in the East Coast, and just the enlarging of the other one. So it's a hard question though. What's good, when at least Eric's comment about interstate commerce, because all of these states have built in these, great tax base, revenues from these cultivations in their state. And so if they're allowing interstate commerce to happen, that might, take away a lot of that money from them. So it'll really be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. I think some states like Oregon who have, overproduction, and some of these other places, like they're going to push for that kind of stuff, where, some of these other states are like, well, we don't want that, it's too cheap there. So I think we'll have some, I think the market, for a lot of the businesses is going to remain low. The market in general across the U.S., if that isn't a new state, we'd say, if you talk to some of the major, bigger companies in the U.S., they're down, and they're going to continue to be down. I think the black market shrinks every day that the legal market gets bigger. And a lot of those businesses, like it or not, they thrive they live in the black market, not in this commercial market. So we're lucky enough that we don't really see that because that's just not our business anymore.
Mm-hmm. Eric, what does the ideal cultivation facility look like in your opinion?
Ideal. I mean, there's never one perfect fit. Ultimately, I'd like to make sure that, whatever facility is being rolled out, that our clients and staff feel comfortable operating it, that they're not biting off more than they can chew, that they're taking advantage of as many, automation technologies and processes as they can to make sure that, they can be comfortable and reduce their workload. It's tough to say because you can't even say it on scale. Like I've done some smaller, I say smaller, but, maybe a few 5,000-10,000 square foot facilities that I love and are, producing amazing quality product by some of the most capable growers in the world. And, I've also been really impressed and proud of some of these huge multi-100,000 square foot facilities we've done. And then I've seen other facilities that are kind of in the mid-range that are producing mid-quality product. And I'm like, wow, you really have a spaceship, but you're not putting out a good quality product to make you proud of it. But that said, I guess I don't have a perfect, I just hope that they're enjoying what they're doing and they're growing good weed.
Eric, are you still enjoying what you're doing?
Oh, hell yeah. I live and breathe it. Love it.
Shed, before we get out of here, is there anything else that we might have left out or anything in particular that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience knows about Cultivation Warehouse?
I guess if anything, and I know Eric feels the same way, that ultimately we're here to help, and that it's not about $1 today for us. And it might not be $1 tomorrow, but if we can be, of help for anybody, feel free to reach out to us. Our network is probably our biggest asset. And, by, giving back to the community. Actually, we have a social equity program that we've rolled out. That's something, that we're pretty proud of, and we're giving away, over $1 million in services, which to people. We can't give away equipment. We don't own equipment, but we can give away our services to people. And it's been pretty successful. We've got 7 or 8 cultivations right now in different states that we're helping people that are disadvantaged and don't have the same opportunity that we've had. We're lucky enough to have those opportunities. So that's something that we're pretty proud of, like I said, and that it's going really well. And we feel like, we're arming people with the opportunity to be successful where they might not have had that chance before.
No, that's incredible. I'm sorry that I missed that. When did you start the social equity program?
I'd say October or November. We started taking applications, I think, right around then. And that's really the only thing we've marketed or advertised. We've thrown out some press releases and it's gotten picked up here and there. And, it's quality, not quantity for us. And we were able to kind of, give people, take people through the steps of how to do this and using our experience and help them be successful as far as we're concerned.
Understood. Eric, any final thoughts for the CEN listeners before we get out of here?
No, I just appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully our paths can cross at some point. And I have to say thank you, David, for inviting us. This has been really fun and informative. So appreciate you hosting this forum.
Yeah, no, thank you both very much. It has been your expertise in particular is what drew me in, just because I like that you've had so much experience in the industry, and just the scale of projects that you've been in is incredible.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for get the opportunity to speak.
Excellent. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to reach the podcast, you can email me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com. All right, for Eric Paulin and Eric Shedlarski, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.